Do you remember having recess as a child? It was the best part of elementary school, when we could do what we wanted. It was a time of joy and fun, within a fenced playground, under the watchful eyes of parents and teachers. Whatever happened to recess? Well, free time at school became study hall. Everything we did in school became focused on preparing us for adult responsibilities. Play was considered a waste of time, immature and childish. But what if we were wrong? What if the adults were wrong? What if independence and responsibility were not the purpose for which we were intended? In Matthew 18:1-4, Jesus tells us something very important. He says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself like this child is greatest in the kingdom of heaven." Children depend on others, not on themselves. Bring joy to their parents. Play is their first concern, not work. In John 3, Jesus said to Nicodemus, "Truly I say to you, you must be born again." That meant he must surrender control of his life, surrender his illusion of wisdom and knowledge, and regain his childlike sense of dependency and awe. Well, think about the kingdom of heaven as God's playground. God is in the midst of it. The fence around it is God's law. It sets the boundaries for what we are to do. Within the playground are many delightful things, and we, God's children, have been invited in to play. We need to see play in the context of the history of salvation. Our race began in the Garden of Eden. And the Bible tells us when he created the garden, that before he created the garden, God rested. Now, God doesn't need to rest, obviously. God doesn't rest because he's tired. He rests so he can sit back and enjoy what he has made. And inside the Garden of Eden, he placed the first humans, Adam and Eve. In Genesis 2:18-19, he told them what they were to do. They were to dress and keep the garden. In other words, you can do anything you want to, create it any way you wish, as long as you stay away from the one tree that I told you not to eat. Well, Adam and Eve enjoyed the garden for we do not know how long, but eventually they ate of the forbidden fruit, and then sin entered and they were put out of the garden. And when we're put out of the garden, we're put out of God's fence. We have to work. But then Christ came along. And when Christ came along, he restored us to where we ought to be. Now, at the end of the Bible, we read about heaven. And heaven is the new Eden. In Revelation 1 and 2, it calls it a new heaven and a new earth. It also is a time of play and enjoyment. So, salvation history begins with play in the Garden of Eden, and it ends with play in heaven. And along the way, God gave us something very special. He called it the Sabbath day. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh is a Sabbath to the Lord. The reason for the Sabbath is the same reason that God rested on the Sabbath day. It isn't just because we're tired. It's because he wants us to sit back and enjoy life occasionally. In other words, he wants us to play. So God created this garden, this salvation garden, where he protects us and watches over us. And he gives us freedom to do as we wish. Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath, That means he is the Lord of rest. When Jesus comes into our life and when we come in relationship with him, we are set at rest so we can enjoy life. In Hebrews 4:9, it tells us that he is our Sabbath rest. He is the rest he gives us. When we come to Christ, we enter back into God's playground. The Westminster Shorter Catechism puts it this way: what is the chief end of man? To glorify God and to enjoy him forever. The enjoyment of God, not just our service, is our chief purpose on earth. But aren't we supposed to grow up? Doesn't the Bible tell us to be mature and to put away childish ways? Yes, but more than 100 times the New Testament calls us to be children. It is only about 9 times that we're told to be mature. Besides, we often misunderstand what God means by maturity. Natural maturity and spiritual maturity are not the same thing. Let's use this chart to explain the difference between natural and spiritual maturity. You notice across the bottom is age, and the arrows going up and down represent independence, and in between there is a graph. When we look at natural maturity, it looks like this. In natural maturity, we gain independence from teachers, parents, etc. That's the purpose of natural maturity, to make us independent and responsible in the world. So on a graph, it looks like this. We grow for a while, and then when we reach adulthood, we become fully matured. And for the most part, we remain that way the rest of our lives, as mature, responsible individuals. But spiritual maturity looks somewhat different. It looks the same for a while. Spiritual maturity looks like natural maturity for a while, because we have to grow until we are independent from teachers and parents, and being able to speak to God and know God on our own. But then spiritual maturity takes a different turn. Spiritual maturity, as we grow, grows into a deeper dependence on God, not independence from him. In other words, as we grow, we become more dependent on God in everything. The older we get and the deeper we go in the Lord, the more we begin to behave like children, dependent on God for everything. But what is play? According to Dr. Stuart Brown, play is anything we do without apparent purpose for its own sake. In other words, it's anything we do for the fun of it. Play is, according to Dr. Brown's book, something done for its own sake, something that is voluntary, done out of free will, something that we can lose ourselves in doing, something that has improvisational potential, and something that we want to do again and again and again. Now I want to talk to you about the 5 necessities of play. That is, 5 conditions that must be met in order for us to get the benefit of play. First, we must feel safe. That's the attitude of enoughness that we spoke about earlier and we'll speak about later. Second, we must stay within God's fence. That's the attitude of obedience to God. Third, who we play with is more important than what we play, relationships with God and people. Fourth, we must be free and let others be free in play. That's called openness. And 5, we must be active and not passive. Play must involve passion. Now, there are some people who say, but wait a minute, I enjoy what I do. My work is my play. If you do that way, great. Work and play do not have to be opposites. In fact, we hope they aren't. Work is play when you would do it for free. Think about the job that you have right now and ask yourself, what if you didn't get paid for it? What if you didn't need to get paid for it? Would you still do it because you enjoy it? Then that's play. The book of Ecclesiastes tells us, a person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. This too I see is from the hand of God. This line is repeated 3 times in Ecclesiastes. Our satisfaction doesn't just come from doing work, but it comes in work. First, in order for us to play, we must feel safe. This is what I call enoughness. Here are some verses about enoughness. Psalm 23:1, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. Philippians 4:12, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Philippians 4:19, for my God will supply all your need according to the riches in Christ Jesus. And Psalm 145:16, you satisfy the desires of every living thing. Because we already have enough, we have time enough for play. Here's an affirmation that I use to remind myself of God's enoughness. I have enough money because God supplies what I need. I have enough food because God gives me my daily bread. I have enough shelter because God shelters me under his wings. I have enough safety because God guides my way. I have enough love because the Father himself loves me intimately. I have enough peace because he is the Prince of Peace. I have enough rest because God gives his beloved sleep. I have enough delight in my life because God delights in his children. I have enough attention because God and his angels watch over me always. I have enough comfort because my comfort comes from God. I have enough joy because it is God's Spirit of joy that is placed in my heart. I have enough forgiveness because Christ has already forgiven me. I have enough guidance because the Lord is my shepherd. I have enough power because God's Spirit dwells within me. I am smart enough because God tells me what I need to know. I am wise enough because God gives me wisdom. I am liked enough because God likes me and sees my beauty. I have enough justice because God brings justice to all in the end. My times are good enough because God created me for these times. I have done enough because whatever I say or do, he already appreciates. Whatever I did not say or do, he already forgave. And whatever I forgot to say or do, God will finish. Nothing is lacking in me. Nothing is incomplete in me. Nothing is ugly in me in God's eyes, because he sees me through the eyes of love. I need nothing, lack nothing, am missing nothing, want nothing. In all things and in all ways, I have enough. Second, in order to play, we must stay within the fence. That's called obedience. Now, God protects us inside the fence, but when we step out of his protection, we are not protected by him. And we step out of his protection by, first of all, by deliberately breaking his rules, or by declaring our own independence from God. But we can step back into his protection when we return to the fence. In other words, when we start obeying again. Third, who we play with is more important than what we play. That's called relationships. It doesn't matter what game we play or whether we win or lose. What really matters in play is the company you keep. Now let's imagine that for a moment that you're on a date with somebody that you think you might really be interested in. You go to a movie and a dinner, and the dinner turns out to be terrible, and the movie turns out to be terrible. Is the date a failure? Not necessarily. Because if you're with somebody that you really like and they like you, it doesn't matter what the movie is or what the dinner was. All that matters is that you've met each other and that you like each other. Playing is about relationships. Playing with God is getting to know him better. Playing with others is getting to know them better. It doesn't matter who wins or loses. Fourth, when we play, we are free. That's called openness. Now, If you remember your experience on the playground, you probably remember that there were one or two children, I call them the bossy sisters of the kingdom, who seemed to know all the rules. They seemed to know how every game is played and are ready to tell you that you were not playing it right. Well, when you're playing on God's playground, there are no bossy sisters of the kingdom. We do not tell other people how to play. We are open and tolerant. We do not necessarily all have to be the same. As long as we stay within the fence, we can be different. And we don't have to play the rules the way it was always played. As long as we stay within the fence, we can do whatever we want. And we can use our imaginations to come up with new ways and new things to do in the house of God. And finally, play is active, not passive. That's called passion. Imagine, if you will, a sick child who is next to the playground. She sits at a window and she watches people play. It's a very sad thought. She may enjoy watching them, but she'd rather be in the midst of it. Well, imagine that that is not a child, but an adult. And imagine instead of looking at people play in a window, they're looking at people play on a widescreen television. Why isn't that just as sad? When we allow our time alone, when we allow ourselves just to watch the world go by, then we're really not playing the way God intended. God intended for us to be active, passionate participants in the game of life. He wants us to be involved in His kingdom, involved in His work, and enjoying Him, not just watching others enjoy Him. Next time in part 2, we'll see how work and play come together.